Mm. And hopefully you could see the slide, just the slideshow, not the presenter view thingy I got up. I was playing around with this yesterday, trying to make sure it would work the right way for me. Kind of let people trickle in real quick. But hopefully everybody's been having a good Khitomer day thus far. But I'll go ahead and get started real quick while people kind of trickle in real quick. Well, see what everybody's saying. But I will be doing the, how to make an interesting character without Mary Sue. Because I did this for Obsidian Day a couple months ago and seemed to, people hopefully learned a little something out of it. And it's so important to talk about, even if you have a character, how to improve on that character, or if you're making an NPC or starting a new sim, and you're just like, hey, what can I do to, make a good character, improve my character, stuff like that. So I will go ahead and get started. So, like I said, you know, my Discord name on here is NC. I'm a part of several sims within Obsidian and Theta Fleet. So, I was like, what would be a good topic to be like, hey, something that everybody could use or everybody's kind of seen and everything, and they can kind of improve on or use the information and be beneficial to everybody. So I was like, how to make an interesting character without Mary Sue. And one of the first things that most people are thinking about when either they're applying to a new sim, or making a new character like an NPC or something, is the species and the position that they're trying to do. Because usually one of the first questions after, what's your name and what's your email and all that kind of stuff is what's the name of your character, what position are you applying for, and it's important to kind of say, not limit yourself to saying like a, a Klingon's going to always just be a security officer or Vulcan's always going to be a science officer. So that's something to kind of think about, because we've, since Star Trek came out in 1966, we've had so many species come out. We've had, the Vulcans, the Andorians, the Tellarites, even in TOS, um, stuff like that. So something to kind of think about when you're, either, usually for when you're making a new character is, you got to think about what time period that the sim is in. Because a lot of people are like, I would love to do a Klingon, but if you're doing a Klingon on like an Enterprise era sim, that might not make a whole bunch of sense. It might be interesting, it might be possible, but you're like, okay, how's this going to work? So that's something that to think about when you're kind of making that new character, thinking about what position they're going to be playing on and everything. And another question you might want to ask is, going back to the Klingon motif, how did first contact go with the people? Because we look back at like Enterprise, in that era, and think about how the Klingons met Earth, the Federation and everything, Starfleet, how did the Romulans do it? They had a war in 2156. Going through right before the Federation was founded. Those were really important questions to be like, how did that kind of go for them? How did first contact go for them, and all that kind of good stuff. Let's see. Oh, well, there we go. How did they meet? And then kind of going on, the next thing is, if a sim's in a later generation, TNG, DS9, Voyager, or even the like the 32nd century Discovery era kind of thing, how has the relationship evolved over that time period since first contact? You could really see it with, like I said, the Romulans, Klingons, or even stuff like the Cardassians. Even though that's a more recent iteration of a new species. It was introduced in the middle of TNG, but we've kind of seen how they evolved and since first contact, and we've heard about how they evolved since first contact with the Federation in the early 24th century. So those are some really big things to kind of think about when you're making a new person, a new character and everything for your sim, or even doing that NPC. If you're trying to do a new NPC for them and everything, just seeing how like we've even seen like people like Saru and the Kelpians. We've got to see how they've evolved since from the 23rd century before they had the what am I thinking of? Where they had the ganglia and they were really nervous. Where in the 32nd century they've evolved and become peaceful with the Baul, the other species on the Kelpian homeworld. So it's just kind of interesting to think about, when you're doing this and trying to write up for a new character and just kind of going off of that. Another question you might want to ask is, it's always important to look at the rules. No matter if it's just for the sim, something that the game master, the GM has put forward, the fleet that they're a part of, like if it's Obsidian, Theta, Bravo, whatever fleet that you're in, always kind of look at, if there are any certain specific rules or regulations on the type of species that you're allowed to do. Because I know on a couple sims and that I'm a part of, they always talk about, they talk about either getting permission from the game master for doing, Delta Quadrant, Gamma Quadrant species. They're kind of like maybe frowned upon, like let's not do a Q. Or let's have a nice conversation about what kind of character. Um, yeah, like no Horta, stuff like that, and that kind of goes back to again, what era is the sim in? That might be part of why they say, hey, let's not do these kind of species because we're not friends. Can we take an asylum? Absolutely, but that's something that a lot of you would have to do a lot of like, hey, GM, I've got this idea for this one character. Um, it's can I do it? Because I know, especially with me, I've got a couple that are like hybrid species. Especially one I've got like a hybrid Frill and Elorian. You could something to think about is like how old are they? Can they join? What's the joining process like for them? Are they going to have to take medication for it? Um, to be able to join. And that kind of goes into what kind of um, what kind of canon is accepted. some people will say only the stuff from the TV and the movie series are allowed. Some will say, comic books, regular books, um, stuff from Star Trek Online is accepted. But kind of going off of what the presenter before me did, how much of Star Trek Online is accepted. Because I've seen there's some sims and some fleets that are wholly from Star Trek Online, and they do a lot of it's a lot of good stuff from Star Trek Online. But I know some people they're like it's a finicky subject, so that's something you might want to ask as well when you're doing building up a new character. And because I know going off the Star Trek Online missions that I've seen here recently is the species 8472. That's something they have a name from Star Trek Online named like the Undine or something. I believe that is. Would something like that be accepted? How would that be played out? That's something to kind of be asking about when you're figuring out, hey, I want to make this new species and everything. Now, is there any questions real quick before? Because I know I kind of breezed through all that real quick. Is there any kind of questions that anybody might have real quick about making a new character thus far? Or the species or anything like that? Okay. Nothing thus far real quick? Okay. Next one we'll go off to is we talk more about, we'll kind of go into the positions, kind of how they might relate to when you're thinking about writing for a character. Something, that would be really important to think about when you're writing for a character, or, you see, there might be like a science officer or an engineer or even a diplomat or something like that, is don't let yourself get typecasted because well, oops, get back one more. um, we've seen stuff like because, like I said at the beginning, if you were to talk about a Klingon, one of the first things you might think of is, oh, they're good, they're warriors, they're good, they might be good in security and tactical stuff like that, at least on a starship, Starfleet ship. But I've actually seen it on several sims as, Klingon scientists, Vulcan counselors, stuff like that. And kind of going off of that is like, don't let the species typecast you into thinking, oh, they can only do so much. Because especially going off the Vulcan one, while they suppress their emotions, they have from all the series, movies, and everything, they have a deep understanding of their emotions too. So having a Vulcan counselor might be an interesting way for them to say, hey, while I suppress my emotions, I still understand them and I can understand them for you. And especially, with Vulcan mind meld, that's a whole other subject kind of thing, being able to understand the emotions of other people. Cardassian scientists in DS9. We even had like the Ferengi Klingon and other one from the one TNG episode. Yeah, exactly. They feel very, very deeply, and that's why they kind of had kind of going back through the history of Vulcans is back to the Serac. They were just so passionate. They just had so many passionate emotions that they kind of ended up starting to suppress them. Following the teachings of Serac, stuff like that. Um, Again, they don't. It's not that they don't have emotions because many conversations I think Kirk and Spock and so many other people have had with Vulcans. It's not that they don't have emotions, it's just that they choose to suppress them. And that's why, especially with when Vulcans start getting up there in age, like closer to I think like 200, as we saw with Sarek, Bendai syndrome. Is Yesteryear the one from the animated series where the Spock went back in time to be able to save his younger self? Just trying to remember. Okay, yeah, because I think it's been a while since I've seen that episode, and very talking about that, kind of going off of you know that's a very good point. It it kind of helps us give us some idea of how Vulcans might be able to help with emotions as a counselor, or you know, a Klingon scientist might be able to, especially going back because I use the Enterprise episodes just because, just to show you, hey, even in the Klingon Empire, where they had the cranial ridge issue, talking about that, not only in Starfleet do they have Klingon scientists, but they have it in their own empire. So that's always something to kind of don't typecast what you're trying to apply for to the species. Is there any other questions, real quick, before I move on to the next one? Okay. Yeah, because that's something. Um, I know some fleets, even though they allow like XPs, or I've seen XPs, what they call former Borg, allowed on Sims. It is very hard, and that's why some Sims say, "Hey, come talk to us before you actually make your, do all this stuff and make your XP," and then we deny it, because that is, depending on what species they were beforehand, what when they were got out of the Borg collective, um, all that kind of stuff could be a challenge for each person writing it for an XP, because we could talk about like Seven of Nine. He was in there since he was like what 10 years old, and that presents a different challenge than somebody like Jean-Luc Picard or Captain Janeway or people like them who only had a little bit of time within the Borg collective. I'm not saying that each person didn't, have something that changed their experiences, from then on out, but it's a different experience for each person. So now that would actually, the Ferengi philanthropist would actually be an interesting concept, but something that we might see with that is like Rom, since he became the Grand Nagus at the end of DS9. I'm not going to say he's a total philanthropist, but that would be an interesting little tidbit for them. So, see what way they would go under Rom. Just to give an example. Very true. And this is stuff that, kind of making your character, that you would think about if you're writing for like a Ferengi. What kind of Ferengi, would be a profitable one that, does philanthropy, kind of like, um, trying to think of a good episode because I know a couple Deep Space Nine episodes probably have done this where they talked about, like, especially with Quark. Yeah, yeah, that would definitely be something too, because something you could probably do like with the Ferengi pastor is, what would a Ferengi Vedic be like, in the Bajoran religion? What would, how would that kind of storytelling be for Yeah. Well, and talking about televangelist kind of thing, we did see that I think a little bit in maybe the lower deck episode. I think it was like in the third or fourth season where they visit like Ferenginar or something like that. It was touch on. Yeah, I think so. They were talking about the blessing. That one, and especially writing for a new character or even building upon what you've done with your own character. Yeah, this is why thinking about what your position is, um your species is in Starfleet is important because like there's so many things you could do with your species, with your character. Excuse me. Um, and it's so fun, especially when you're writing for a new character, to think about all this stuff. And that kind of leads us into the next little bit of our thing, as I have up right now, is the strengths and weaknesses of your character. Um, I know with a lot of people use Nova and everything, especially when they're when you're filling out your stuff when you're for your character, and kind of buried in there is the strengths and weaknesses of your character. And this is something that more relates to new characters and characters you already have, because most time we put something in there, forget about it, and say, oh, okay, we're done. But especially with Mary Sue, um, going don't be afraid to go back and as your character evolves over time, to go back and be able to change and say, hey, I've got a new strength, I've got a new weakness, just like the people behind the character, we're going to always have, yeah, exactly, especially because I know some people have been maybe have a character that's a 10-plus-year-old character. Don't be afraid to go back and say, oh, I've got figured out this new thing, like um for example, like I use a lot of Elorian characters or part Elorian characters, and being able to say, one thing that I always put in there is saying, hey, they are very distrustful of ex-Borg, cybernetic people, or cybernetically enhanced people, but going back and eventually saying, maybe tweaking that as they kind of go along and everything, or and understanding like you're going to have some strengths, you're going to have some weaknesses, but don't say you just have all strengths or all weaknesses, because that's kind of where we start seeing a little bit of like the Mary Sues and everything. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes like Max said, sometimes it's you realize something that might be you know something that, yeah, yeah, because I know especially that's something that when you're writing your characters, like if you have a 50-year-old DeLorean that comes from a species of listeners that it takes some time, maybe takes some time for him to gain his or her ability to listen and understand and everything. He, and that could be definitely be like a weakness that is perceived by your characters. Like, why can't I, listen as well as some of my peers and everything like that? Um, or it could be looked at as a strength as well, where he or she may have to go back and say, hey, I don't have this listening ability, but I pick up on do better in other areas where I maybe have this weakness right there. So, and that's definitely something to think about too when you're writing your character. Yeah, yeah, because I actually, when I was researching some of the stuff for Mary Sue, like because I have a little tidbit at the end. Most people think of the classic Mary Sue, which is the most one that most people think about. Is which I don't think the next one has that, but there's several that come into play, especially when you're, that some people might not realize when they're, writing their character and all that kind of stuff. It may not be immediately apparent either for them, the people that they're going to be writing with. It might come up later on. So sorry if my voice is a little scratchy. I think there's some bugs going around where I work, and so if my voice is a little scratchy today, I do apologize. Yeah, and something I didn't include it in my presentation or anything, but one of the types of Mary Sues was what they call the slutty Mary Sue, and that's the one that pretty much like the definition of it is. Let's see here. Yeah, it's like the definition of a slutty Mary Sue was pretty much like her classic cousin. This Mary Sue has a wide range of superior skills, but they are specific to the ability to attract, you know, mates or lovers or whatever kind of stuff. So, you know, one of the big things I've had, I wrote down when I was kind of doing some research originally for Obsidian Day for interesting characters was, how do relationships work out? How would, because you go into a new sim, and if you have somebody that, like you said, that instantly wants to be with somebody, another character, or they instantly want to find a mate on board or whatever, or a relationship on board, that could be distracting away from not only the character that they're trying to interact with, but the other people on the sim that are trying to do, write stuff up and everything. And especially with something like as a CO or something like that, or somebody that's one of the game masters, assistant game masters, or even just people on the sim, how do we interact with that person, or how do we deal with that kind of person, or any kind of person that might have a Mary Sue trope? As somebody that isn't a CO or a game master, that's something I don't have any experience with. Now that's the first one I've never seen before. Duty play. I'm like, that is definitely a first. um, okay. Oh, okay. Okay, that makes sense. I've just never heard it put like that, and yeah, because that was definitely an interesting way to put it. That, but I think even when I was researching it and looking at like the different definitions and everything, um, yeah, or even the spotlight characters and everything. Um, yeah, and something that I've seen, especially once you start getting onto the sim, do your arrival post. You might do like a medical post with the doctor on board. Get go meet the CO. Something that I've seen throughout a couple different sims that kind of helps integrate your new character or whatever, or your new NPC, depending on what you're doing, is have them kind of come on board, like maybe do an off-duty post or something like that, or you know because at least I like doing that because I'm like I do my like I said my first post, my medical post, and meet the CO post kind of thing, and I like to go maybe do like a fun like getting into my quarters post or something like that. Just say hey, I'm getting on the ship, maybe running into people, maybe go to the 10 forward, bar or whatever is comparable on your ship and just meet some new crew members, people that might be on board. And that definitely helps with the character, being able to integrate them, see how they might interact with other people on board and kind of showcase your character actually once they get on board. So, which that actually kind of. And I think something too is like do you use Nova when you on your Sims Max, or do you use like another like Discord or something else? If you don't mind me asking. Okay, yeah, because I was gonna say I think I've seen a lot on like the newer Nova sites and everything. Like I know if you're the one that wrote it, you could like after you post it and everything, you could actually go back and edit a post if you see something that you kind of yeah, very true. Because and something too, going off of what you said about that is like maybe depending on the species, because I know there's a couple like one or two sims I'm on. We have a couple Gorn characters, interesting characters. They have it all fleshed out and everything. Very interesting character, but sometimes what he does with his character, since maybe the universal translator doesn't always perfectly pick up something with the Gorn or other species, is they um, might put an extra couple like R's or something into a word, or a couple extra like letters into the word, depending on what the word is. And it's just the way that they kind of talk. Since they're Gorn, maybe the universal translator doesn't always perfectly pick it up. Or like if you have Tholians or something that you may be talking to, and so that that's kind of just an interesting little thing that I like seeing sometimes too. So, and yeah, like something that I'm going to try and start doing with some of my characters is like maybe once every 6 months, a year, just going back and looking at my character, the character's bio, making sure the age is correct, making sure see what else I might be able to add in for my character and everything like that. Adding the strengths and the weaknesses that he might have picked up or dropped off, stuff like that. Yeah, especially because sometimes depending on how long your character's been on a sim, um, if it's just been for like a year, or 2 years or whatever, or 6 months, sometimes, like I said, we forget to like go back and actually look at our characters and change them up and everything to be able to say, oh, is the age correct for like the new year, depending on when you wrote the character or stuff like that. So it's good to, like I said, maybe if you're looking at a character, maybe go back like now after a year or two, look and be like, okay, make sure everything's right, or add stuff to them as well. That too. Yeah, because yeah, exactly. Like, because I know a lot, depending on different Sims. Because I know one of the ones I'm on in Obsidian Fleet, and one that I have in I think Theta Fleet. Something that they do is, I'm kind of getting a little off topic, but they did have different missions that, like in a click down menu, that you could actually work with, and like Indy said, is depending on if you have a specific mission or setting or something like that that you want to revise for your character, um, and stuff like that. It'd be good to go back and actually say, oh, we're in this new part of space or something. Definitely good to update. So, which that actually kind of goes a little bit into my next point, real quick: goals, motivations, outcomes for your character. This one, I kind of was like, um, you know, this might not be something that you're, really thinking about when you're writing your character, or it might be, depending. But like with Data, um, he was always striving to be more human. He knew he probably would never reach being fully human, and in a way, he never really did. But we saw him evolve over several seasons of TNG, four movies, and came back in, end of season three, or the end of Picard in the third season, where he evolved over that time. You know, and he had a daughter. He ended up having, an emotion ship. We got to see, goals, motivations, and outcomes. You don't have to go in thinking, "Oh, I'm going to do this with my character." Just think, "Oh, I have this character. He's striving to be. They're striving to be, yeah, pretty much have a character arc over like, hey, this is how my character is going to change over time, or I would like to have them change over time." Another one I put in there was War, just because his parents were killed at Kidam, actually at Khitomer, I think, right? Um, he was raised by humans, but he still strove to be a Klingon, go by the Klingon culture, become a warrior, and got to see how he changed over, again, 7 seasons of Voyager, four seasons of the DS9 movies, last season of Picard, and how he kind of was able to, you know, live up to the Klingon way. Just something to think about when you're kind of, especially more so for when you're actually getting into writing for your character, um, more for like the people that have the established characters already. Something to just think about, even for just specific missions or stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. And something with this one too is, with the next part, we kind of talked about the different Mary Sues, but we got to also figure out like how to integrate our strengths and weaknesses as character into the story, or don't overdo it with thinking, oh, we're going to be the hero of the story, or we're going to, take command instantly of the ship, because all like kind of like the Doctor was thinking in, I think it was Tinkerton or Doctor Spy or something like that, where he just like turns into the ECH in his daydreams, you know, becoming almost like a Mary Sue in a way, the classic Mary Sue. But we're all our own hero in our own way, but in integrating all that stuff that I've kind of mentioned beforehand into a good character and a good story arc. But yes, that actually was a very good episode, especially near the end where he kind of outmaneuvers the Malon, I think it was, and talks about the photonic cannon and eventually helps to save the day. And something, kind of going off that episode is, in his daydreams, he was very much of a Mary Sue. But at the end of the day, yeah, exactly. All the women wanted him. He was irresistible. The dudes were just like, mutton chops, thrown to the side kind of thing. But at the end of the day, something that he did have that kind of helped save the day was the emergency command call, hologram. Very good idea. Even though the Doctor had to be reined back in and everything, he reined it back in, helped save the day, and kind of took a lesson, or took a lesson and put it in his book and said, "Hey, we can't be doing that kind of stuff anymore." So, and always in going off one more thing for the Tinker Tenor Doctor Spy, you know, coming in to save the day against all the Borg and Mr. Tuvok and everything by using the photonic cannon. So, but yeah, which leads into our last little um, thing of today: originality and good old Mary Sue. Kind of what everybody, we've been kind of hinting at all throughout the, original, the making an interesting character without her. Most people think, the classic definition when somebody says Mary Sue, defines himself as the most beautiful, powerful, intelligent, loved in every way, and doesn't have pretty much any kind of um, problems or issues or anything like that, and can do no wrong. Kind of like we were talking about here a minute ago with the Doctor's daydreams. That actually is a perfect example of like, hey, the Doctor was perfect. He couldn't get harmed. He was infallible, and nothing could be, no bad could happen to him, pretty much. And that's just one version of Mary Sue, though. Like I was saying, kind of beforehand. Um, yeah, with the photonic cannon, you know, such a classic Mary Sue, just to the point of you like scratching your head, like, really, dude, really. Um, but like I was saying, kind of a little bit ago, was there's actually 7 of them. If she finds a spot in the ship that has the best acoustics, let me know. um, and we'll definitely pull out the rollout piano thing from the duet with Captain Picard and Commander Darren. I just wonder how that room would actually have some good acoustics. Just figure that part out. Exactly. Um, but real quick, going into the next little bit, real quick. talking about the different Mary Sues and everything. Exactly. But yeah, talking about the different Mary Sues, going off at the classic Mary Sue, the tragic Mary Sue, the belligerent Mary Sue, slutty, copycat, transplant, and inside Mary Sue as well. Um, talking about the different, everybody knows the classic Mary Sue. Gave the definition a minute ago. Excuse me. Um, but most of the rest of them are pretty self-explanatory. Um, Tragic Mary Sue is pretty much, your one that's a little bit more subtle. They almost define it as like the anti-Sue, Mary Sue kind of thing, where everything bad happens to them. You don't have, um, everything, where when I was talking about like the strengths and weaknesses of your character, when I said, don't let it go one way or the other, the classic Mary Sue is where you have too many strengths, where the tragic Mary Sue is you have almost too many weaknesses. Um, and you can never get up, get ahead in life and everything. Just can't like your character, um, just pretty much where nothing good could happen for them. You like your character and everything. Where like the belligerent Mary Sue, pretty much again, as the title says, they're always lashing out. Whether like kind of their character always lashes out, the person behind the character always lashes out, or both, really. Because we have a lot of you know they just get upset at the littlest of things. You know, pretty much again, kind of in a way could go into the tragic Mary Sue or the classic Mary Sue, depending on which way you want to look at it. Either way, and in a way, a little bit. Because something when I was doing my slides and everything, talking about the strengths and weaknesses, going back to Balana, especially like those first two seasons, like season or two of Voyager, she was very angry in a way, a little bit. Not every single episode, but I just remember, I think it was like the second or third episode in, where something had happened. Lana was confined to quarters, and Cote came to visit her, and she threw like a pot at him as he walked in the door. But that could be considered like a weakness a little bit for her, just like the anger issues and everything like that. But her strength was she was a damn good engineer, and that's why she got the yeah. He put four carries those, but she was a good engineer and she knew her shit. And I think coming from somewhere like the Maquis, where she had maybe a little bit more free reign to be able to do some stuff, and then all of a sudden having to go back into Starfleet was kind of hard for her. So the good thing was they kind of started making sure she didn't keep falling into a Mary Sue kind of situation. It was good storytelling, yes, but it could have, like we've kind of said, it could have gone way worse. A deep Mary Sue and everything. And then we have like the slutty Mary Sue again, kind of hit on that a little bit, where their character is like the prettiest one in the whole wide world and everything. Um, Gets all the depending on the gender and everything of the character, they get all the guys and the girls, whatever. They always look the best, are the best, and can pretty much pick up anybody that they want to. The next two, Mary Sue's, copycat and transplant, kind of go hand in hand a little bit sometimes. Is um, the copycat is like pretty much making another, pretty much your James D. Kirk, and you're playing in the 24th century now. Where the transplant might be more of a, hey, I took this character from Babylon 5 or, Stargate SG-1 or something like that, and pretty much made the same character, different name. I mean, in that one, those two are a little bit like, if we have some characteristics that are similar, those two are kind of a harder one. Yeah, like, because I'm the kind of person that I'm like, I'd rather think of my own characters, and I'm sure we've all kind of thought, oh, it'd be kind of nice to be able to like do something like Kirk or Janeway or something like that. So, and we could also always have stuff from characteristics from them, but really, yeah, but yeah. So, like, if you pretty much copycat and everything, yeah, exactly. Being like Kirk is not the same as Kirk being Kirk. So that's the best way I think I've seen that one. So being like Kirk, but not being Kirk, or being somebody from a different universe or something like that. And then like the last one, the Inside Mary Sue. This one, they talked a lot about was more so for like game masters, assistant game masters, like the COs, the XOs, people kind of high up on the totem pole. Where the example they gave was where a CO makes a new species, writes out everything for that species, um, and then they control how people can apply for that species. They're like, no, you got to do it this way, or no, you got to do it that way, or they're pretty much the ones that have total and utter control of how that species is done and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, like definitely intriguing to see the different ways that we, because I pulled stuff from, different Trek characters myself, pulling from their strengths and everything as a character. And I'm always thinking, how can I make sure I don't like oversell myself too? And that's the one big thing that I've always had, when I've been writing new characters and interesting characters, stuff like that. Just thought about how can I integrate maybe some stuff without sounding like I'm the biggest badass out there. Excuse my language. But that is actually all I had for how to make an interesting character, and without Mary Sue a little bit. Um, kind of gonna say, let's give it to you guys. Talk, if you have any questions or any comments or anything on the last couple minutes of the session, real quick. Well, and I'm going to throw something out there real quick for the last couple of minutes. Is what are you guys' opinion on not directly making a character like a James T. Kirk or something, like a copy and paste, but having characters that are related to people like that, like having like a great great grandson or something of James C. Kirk's brother, something like that. Give you guys thoughts. Especially because I think a lot of you said you were like COs or played on a couple different sims. So that's something I was always wondering. See what you guys say. Yeah, and that's something too. Is like being like a long distance relative. Um, you know, from people like that. So yeah, definitely some different thoughts and everything on it. So and that's something that kind of I always kind of thought about when I saw characters like that. It doesn't happen often, but every so often I'll see something like that, and I'm just like, just wanted to see what kind of opinions were on that. But I will say, I think right before 2 o'clock, and I know the next group's about ready to come on, so I will say thank you guys for coming and listening in and let me ramble for an hour or so. And if you ever want the flies or anything like that, I have them and I can send them to you. And let me know if you have any questions because my DMs are always open as well.